Welcome back to Streaming Media East 2017. We're nearing the end of the second day. I'm Tim Siglin, contributing editor with Streaming Media Magazine and media strategy principal at RealSolver Inc., a company that I just recently joined. With me, I have my good friend Robert Reinhardt, who used to come to everything in a white lab coat, but he's now upgraded to Mr. Rogers cardigans and actual sweater vests. Well, no, you haven't done sweater vests.
No, I don't do sweater vests.
I'll tell you my sweater vest story at some point after the interview.
Sounds good.
So VideoRx, tell me what you do, and I know you do a lot of ninja stuff, but it's with Wowza, not with actual throwing stuff.
It's a difficult question to answer for lay people because, I generally just call myself a video solutions architect.
Okay.
And that's pretty broad and encompassing, and honestly that's a lot of my work is I'm usually I don't want to say I'm the fixer like Harvey Keitel, but I am sort of like that kind of, or the cleaner. Was he called the cleaner?
The cleaner, yeah.
The cleaner.
Yeah.
I clean up other people's messes. I clean up a lot of messes for sure.
Right.
People who thought they were doing it right, they call me in to do something to fix it up. And it could be, I mentioned those three silos all the time. There's encoding, deployment, and playback.
Right.
I know there's a whole lot more to each of those, but
sure.
Generally speaking, I do work in all three of those. And so
it's an interesting model. You're saying essentially rather than going out and doing something from scratch for somebody, they have tried it. They haven't quite been able to master it, and they call you in to fix what they're doing.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, I would say 99% of my work falls into that. Maybe 90. I would say there are bigger projects I get involved on. It's usually about one big project a year, where I am working with. I do assemble other subs of mine to work on a project for companies, but those are bigger budgets, and
sure.
they're not too plentiful.
Okay.
If I'm gonna be honest. Once a year, I feel really good if we get a big project.
So I know Wowza recommends you as a consultant on some of their things. You've clearly done Wowza workshops and like that. Why has that become sort of a go-to for you from a media server standpoint?
Well, I put a lot of investment in the server end of it. I started as a Flash app developer and all that kind of stuff. And so the Flash aspect to Adobe Media Server, which originally was called Flash Communication Server by Macromedia.
Sure.
At a certain point, I got in deep with Media Server, but it had its restrictions. And when I finally took the leap to look at Wowza, I always had this, I knew Chris Knowlton for a long time, and he was like, you should take a look at this. You should take a look at this. I'm like, I've got enough clients on this tech. But when I started to look at it, I was like, wow, I can do a whole lot more than I could in this other technology. And so it really, for me, it was just more that it enabled the people I work for to do things, or me to suggest to them, well, hey, if you want to do this, we can actually do that in Java. We don't have to, because like Flash Media Server, you either wrote that in server-side ActionScript or C++.
Right.
Both very difficult languages.
From AS2 to AS3, you'd have to change up things and a number of those kinds of issues. So were you involved with things like Flash on the Beach and Max?
Oh, I did. I used to do 12 Flash conferences a year.
Wow.
And I do a lot less travel now, and I'm okay with that. I live in a wonderful place in the world, so
you moved to Canada, and it is wonderful. So what, besides Fish and Joel Unico being fairly close by to you, and not having to travel quite as much, what's your take on Flash's demise? And I understand, even those of us who write, we sort of go back and forth on Flash is dead, no, it's not dead. Yes, it is dead. No, it's got some life. I mean, what's your take on Flash as a player technology and what will ultimately force the supplanting of it going forward? Well,
at this point, historically, we're going to see the trend of the other big companies, meaning Google, Apple, and Firefox. Anyone who's got a browser is really the one. They're responsible for killing Flash, right? It's not like Adobe said, "Oh, we're going to stop releasing Flash Player," right? You can download Flash Player, and they keep updating. I mean, it's like what, version 25 now?
Something like
that. I mean, I've lost track, but they used to only do those updates like once every year and a half. Now it's like it seems like 2 to 3 versions a year, but. That's actually not a true statement. That's an alternative fact. We are
close to Trump Tower.
Alternative? It's
alternative.
It's alternative.
We're close to Trump Tower, so you're allowed to do that.
Right.
This is the alternative fact zone, right?
That's
around
right.
the tower.
Are
you still seeing clients who want to deliver in Flash?
That's a very good question. I brought that up in one of my sessions this time. I'm in the middle of 3 projects that all have a active Flash element still in it. All my clients want to move away from Flash, but like one of my clients right now is a real-time auction environment, and they're not going to spend money on a mobile app yet, right? They make enough money, thankfully. It's more of a B2B auction model. So they're in a position where they can sort of tell people coming to the site, well, you have to have all this stuff in place. It's not a big deal. And so for that use case, it makes sense, right? So
and interactivity is part of what they're doing. I would
exactly,
assume.
yeah.
Sure.
But they're not even using Flash. I mean, they basically hired me to move them away from an all-Flash Adobe Media Server setup to Wowza just handling the video aspects of it, and now we've got a little video player and publisher. So they publish from the auction site in, and they play back. I mean, we can do HLS and all this other stuff, but for a live auction, you're not going to have the latency.
Yeah,
the
HLS,
latency is too high.
The latency would definitely be too high. So would they still use RTMP?
Yeah, it's all RTMP
through the Wowza server.
And they would, if they wanted to go mobile. And this is what I complain about a lot in my articles in the magazine, is just that, it's easy enough to say, yay, Flash is dead, but where's the money coming from now to take over the replacement of that tech? And so, you're going to be, even if you're hiring offshore to build, maybe you could get a decent mobile app built for 10 grand, but probably not. I mean, if you're a smaller company, right? This is sort of, at Stream Media, we're in the haves and the have-nots. You've got enterprise where it's just like, oh, what do you mean have a budget for a mobile app? We've had a mobile app for years. Well, of course not. You're a big company. You're Fortune 500.
And you were willing to pay $400,000
exactly.
to have that built.
And I mean, I do work all across the spectrum. Big companies hire. I mean, I've done work for Nike, ABC, you name it. But when it comes down to, the more nuts and bolts of things, people need cheap solutions by and large. I mean, because they got, they don't have limit, what's the expression? Limitless pockets? Unlimited
resources,
Deep pockets.
Deep pockets.
They don't have deep pockets. They have very shallow pockets. And
my pockets are so deep, sometimes they have holes in them.
There you
so
go.
all the money spills out.
It's just pouring out.
Well, that's interesting to hear your perspective on Flash, because it's clearly something that the browser companies, as you say, Mozilla, Google, Apple, are actively trying to suppress in favor of HTML5 video, but there are
just
limitations.
no plugins. I mean, they're not picking on Flash. It's pretty much all plugins.
Yeah.
Like, let's make it virtually impossible
to have a plugin.
Any features to our browser.
But in doing
that's a very negative slant on it. It's like, hey, don't mess with our tech.
In doing so, that means that you have to have replacements for that in the browsers, or people are going to be forced to the apps.
Yes,
and
exactly.
At that point,
And the Google and Apple want that. I mean, that's not conspiracy theory. It makes financial sense.
Absolutely makes financial sense.
And it allows them to control content. I'm not, when you look at the Vices and those kind of web services, I'm not saying I'm, a fan of any of these things, but gambling, adult, anything that has to do with what I still call the blue laws of this country and the mentality, they can still be gatekeepers. That's why I don't like this whole, well, if you can't do it in mobile, just make an app. Well, show me a gambling app. Like, show me one. I haven't seen one yet.
Although, it's interesting talking to people.
I shouldn't say that. There's probably a gambling app out there, but you know what I'm saying.
And there probably are a couple in the UK that will be allowed, but they wouldn't be allowed in the States. So you live in a Commonwealth country. Do you have blue laws, or are they purple laws?
They're different kind of blue laws. They're blue. They're very secular blue laws. It's just like
different
it's more
shades
just
of blue?
More things might be closed on Sunday.
Okay.
But it's not because you're supposed to be at church, right?
It's
just because you know what?
Somebody needs a break.
It's tradition, and we don't mind. Especially I'm on an island. It's all island time there, so But I'm on, go to a city like Vancouver. It's not the same as New York. Vancouver does shut down. You are hard pressed to find something open at midnight, even on a weekday.
And that's even true in Europe. I mean, there are lots of places shut down, so you have to be prepared on a Saturday.
Exactly.
To that. All right, so let's talk about future technologies. What future technologies do you see? I mean, HTML5 has finally sort of gained traction, but in and of itself, that's not that interesting.
Well, the whole standards approach. We just need people to agree on these quote-unquote standards. I mean, WebRTC is looking good. I mean, Google and Mozilla are behind it. You got Microsoft sort of supporting it. Apple, once again, if it's not something they've invented, they don't really want to be at the table right away. Although I was just told by someone who was at my session on on live streaming, like where are we now with live streaming, and I talked about WebRTC. He's actually, I guess, trying to make a business around WebRT solutions. And he said Apple is finally at the table, but they're not making any commitment on when they're actually going to say, because that's not how they roll. They're not going to say, oh yeah, our next release is Safari. You're going to find out when they release Safari that it's supported.
And in fact, people who work at Apple will probably find the same thing out at the same time. We had somebody from StreamRoot earlier, and StreamRoot with their peer-to-peer, it is based around WebRTC. So there clearly are people making businesses around that.
For sure, and they can, again, that's where, if they don't necessarily have it working in browser. I mean, you look at TalkBox with OpenTalk, and I think even Twilio, their SDK, like there's an OpenTalk plugin. Again, we're back to this, if you're on an old version of IE, then you have to install our plugin to make it work. Otherwise, we don't have these nice things available that the modern browser stack has. So I think it's just a matter of time.
And
it's like so much in our industry. It's about having patience.
We've had format wars, we've had player wars, browser wars, we're back to browser and plugin wars. So you're right. I mean, there's that sort of constant back and forth as we think we get one piece fixed, then the next piece comes in. Codecs, for you, what do you see in Codecs?
Again, we're in this transition time, so I just like, if you're gonna, like, no one wants to invest now in having any flash in their system, and if they do it, they want to minimize as minimal as possible. Sure. And I think when it comes to codecs, we're in this hybrid world. Like, okay, you might need flash and you might need WebRTC if you want to do some live offering. It's just more money because you have to keep spinning branches of software dev off that's going to work on the platform you want. Codecs are going to be the same way, I think, in that, we'll I'm hoping, this guy Jan Ozer keeps talking about AV1 and like where we're, and I'm really excited about this idea of an open codec, and I wouldn't lose any sleep if like HEVC suddenly evaporated in 2 years because along comes AV1 and it's going to solve everyone's problem. I'll believe it when I see it.
And do you think AVC has legs enough to last for the next couple years?
Or AV1. AVC, sure.
H264.
Oh, yeah, I don't think it's going anywhere fast. I mean, you've got so much content already encoded in that form. I mean, people can transcode 30,000 hours plus of content, but that's a commitment, and you don't want to do that unless, like,
unless you're sure that your library is actually going to be there. Awesome.
And so,
great, Robert. Thank you very much for your time. See, that went by easily enough.
Oh, yeah.
So this is Tim Siglin, contributing editor, Streaming Media Magazine. We will be right back.